Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Behind the Map. I'm really excited to be speaking with Diana Lavery, a senior GIS engineer at Esri. Diana works on the Policy Maps team as part of the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World. She's an expert in demographics and using maps to better understand population trends. Thanks so much for being here today, Diana. Can you talk a little bit about your interest in mapping and how you got started?
Sure, yeah. I started college as a math major and an economics major. And my college is one of the very, very few ones in the US that has what's called a demography program. And so demography, which is the study of populations, was kind of infused into some of the econ classes that I was taking. And I really took an interest to it, fell in love with it, and realized, oh my gosh, people get master's degrees in this and people make a living off of doing this. And so I totally, continued the econ and math degree, but ended up going in the direction of demography, which has a lot of sociology as well and policy as well. And one of the things that attracted me particularly to policy as one of my areas of expertise or focus in school was the ability to really make change and make a difference at scale, because policies affect people whether they know it or not. And what's normal to one person in one state is totally not normal to someone in a different state, even though they might be the same age, the same kind of educational class, or whatever the case may be. Then one of the electives I had to take was GIS, and that was at the school I was at. It was really in service for the urban planning students, but the demography students were like, a fourth of the GIS class. So we were like the other kids. Um, but I straight away saw the possibilities and thought, oh my gosh, like this is what I want to do. This plus the policy angle plus the population dynamics. This is my happy place. So I ended up really, really nerding out on census data. I worked at somewhere called the Population Reference Bureau, which did a lot of contract work with census for a little while, and then a policy shop and the state of California and all kinds of places. But the main thread was really mapping and population statistics. And so that's what I do here at Esri, and I've been here a little over 9 years.
We've talked to a few cartographers as part of the series, and almost all of them kind of had the same experience of, well, I was in college doing one thing, and then somehow I found GIS, and it was just, totally kind of, intoxicating in a way, and really just very alluring. So, you kind of teed up my next question. You mentioned, policy. You're on the policy maps team. So can you talk a little bit about kind of how your background and your interest in policy kind of carries through to the work you do here at Esri?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of GIS analysts out there are at the state and local government, maybe a city, maybe a county, maybe a township or something. And they're really trying to solve problems and make the world better for their residents in ways that it's a thankless job. They're never gonna be with that moment with the mayor, like ribbon cutting ceremony. There's none of that. That's not why people go into this line of work. And so, but it's really like, okay, we know that seniors here are struggling with paying their heating bill. What are the heating subsidy programs out there? What are other jurisdictions doing? What kind of heating fuel are they using? And so actually, that was one of the maps that I made for the Living Atlas. And a GIS analyst at the city of Seattle saw that map and said, this was exactly what I was looking for, because we were trying to get more heating subsidies for our residents. And so it was like the Living Atlas knew the questions that I was asking already. And I said, Well, I mean, Seattle's not the only one. There's so many cities out there working on the same problems. And so they can tap into the content in Living Atlas, but also add in their own city's content to it all and really make those maps that answer the hard questions.
I love that. I mean, I love that kind of very concrete example of, something you were doing ended up having a very real impact in people's lives. And I think that also kind of gets to my next question, which is your team does do a lot of mapping of data produced by organizations like the US Census Bureau. So in addition to sort of that Seattle example you just mentioned, like, why is it so important to take this vast, collection of data that the census produces every year? And why is it so important to map it?
So the primary use case, I guess, for the census really is the apportionment for congressional seats and representation and all that, and knowing your citizen voting age population and who are they, where are they, what do they look like, and all that. But that's a federal use case. A lot of people are thinking about housing costs. HUD has this threshold called 30% or more of a household's income spent on housing is considered quote unquote burdensome. And so we were able to make a map showing here's where people are experiencing burdensome housing costs. And it's not just renters, it's not just owners, it's even people who own their house free and clear. Some of them are still spending over 30% of their income on the maintenance, on the insurance, the HOA, or whatever the case may be. So,
And what do you, as you're going through and you're sort of doing these mapping projects, what do you find when you put this data on a map?
oh my gosh, my favorite example actually is this health insurance one because when you're looking at a map of counties and you see the state outlines pretty clearly on that county level map, that's when you know there's a state policy at play. And with the health insurance one, it is very obviously Texas and a few other states, they just pop, even at the county level. So then we can dig in deeper and see, okay, what types of people in Texas are the ones without health insurance? What programs are available for them? Um, what policies are in place in different states? Is it children? Is it unemployed people? So on and so forth.
So in addition to the health insurance story, are there other memorable kind of insights that you've surfaced while mapping demographics, or other kind of, I don't know if I want to say favorites, but just things that like you really kind of, they kind of blew your mind when you saw it on a map, and it just has always kind of stuck with you.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite experience is really mapping communities or populations or groups that are not super visible to the everyday person. And so my daughter used to be on this dance team, and there was a girl in the dance team who lived with her grandmother, and her grandmother was her primary guardian. Then I found out that the American Community Survey had data on children in the care of grandparents. And I made the map and I thought, oh my gosh, this girl is actually really not alone. It's a very common experience for many children. And there's a very clear spatial pattern to it. It's just mind-blowing. So I enjoyed that one a lot. Another one was languages spoken. So UNESCO has this list of endangered languages, and the vast majority of endangered languages are actually indigenous or native languages across the world. So I was able to make a map of native North American languages that are still spoken today, and there's a lot of them. And so it really showed that these people are still here, these communities are here, and maps can help make them visible. And the list goes on and on. I've made maps of people in correctional facilities and jails and prisons and halfway homes and things like that. Also, there was a big interest a while back about people experiencing homelessness. And there's so many different levels to that. Are they in transitional shelters? Are they, living in their car or RV? Are they really unhoused and on the street? And so being able to make those kind of maps that show here's where people are, and they're pretty much everywhere. They're in your neighborhood too, even if you think they're not. They are. So that's another thing that I love being able to show people is no, these people are here, they're your neighbors. Back to the affordable housing topic, one that I made pretty early on when I started at Esri was a map of where are the mobile homes or manufactured homes. Because that is one form of affordable housing that isn't really what you might think of in terms of the Section 8 vouchers and all of that stuff. Um, it's a big type of housing stock out there, especially in the Southwest, like Arizona and New Mexico and Nevada. So being able to show that on a map and say, oh, there was a time when you might have lived in a manufactured home. Did you know there's so many other communities out there that are here? And so just those types of experiences are really kind of my favorite. And at the user conference, when people see these maps or they come up, they say, "Oh, I work for like the city of Dallas, and I'm interested in where are the Vietnamese speakers." That was one where I was able to just be like, "Yep, yeah, we got that. Here's the map." And then as I'm searching for that, all these other ones come up. And so then they get interested, or they see, "Oh my gosh, you have so much more than I thought you did in Living Atlas." And so that always just really makes me happy.
So switching gears slightly, but still kind of staying in the realm of demographics. So I think a lot of people don't realize that the census, in addition to publishing all of this data, also includes something called margins of error in their data. And I think it's fair to say a lot of people overlook those and don't really understand what they are. Um,
For sure.
what, can you explain and talk through a little bit about what is a margin of error? And then how do you account for that as you're using that data to build maps?
Yes, this is one of my favorite topics is when the values you're mapping are estimates or ranges. So basically, the census is surveying people in your census tract or your county. They're not asking every single person in your county. So they're just taking a very small sample and then making a population-wide estimate of that. And it's a range. They're saying, okay, we're gonna say there's maybe 150 to 200 people in this exact area. And the midpoint of that range is going to be 175. And so everyone just takes 175 and that's what they map. But we've spent a long time thinking and experimenting and testing what resonates with people in terms of how to communicate that range. Putting words in the pop-up that say, hey, this is an estimate. This percentage is an approximation. We mapped median income one time with symbols, and we had the upper bound and the lower bound right on top of each other, so it made this donut effect. And so you could see the range that way. Another thing we did was using labels to show, hey, this has a really big range or this has a narrow range. So the narrow range would be more reliable. The really big range, we put a little red exclamation point as the label, things like that. So that's for the margin of error for American Community Survey. There's also another slightly different flavor of uncertainty out there with the decennial census called differential privacy. And what that one was they didn't give you a range. They gave you one value, but they said there's fuzziness to it. And if you aggregate up with the blocks to block groups to tracks, the fuzziness gets better and better. So the really small thing, don't trust it, but use it as a building block. So what we did in that case for our map, we were mapping vacant housing. And so at the block group level, we introduced a lot of fuzz in our symbology. And then at the tract level, a little less fuzz, and then up and up, a little less and less fuzz to it all. And that actually assumes that, and it is the case with decennial, that the lines of those block groups and tracks are exact, but the value that you're mapping is what's fuzzy with the vacant housing. I've also done the opposite where the boundaries are the fuzzy thing. And so I had a really fun project one time where we were trying to map people's mental maps of where is the American Midwest. And so people drew on the map using Survey 123. And so we got this like weird cloud around the Midwest and got something like 400 different polygons. But using GIS, we were able to quantify that and really make a much more informative map than just all those polygons stacked on top of each other. But that would be a case where the fuzziness is the actual boundary. Whereas with the census data and American Community Survey, the boundary is fixed and actually very precise. It's the values that you're mapping that's uncertain. But yeah, I love this stuff. And I think it's the former math major. Like my favorite class was statistics, you know. So I really thrive with this kind of mapping.
It's really interesting because it sounds like it's kind of a mix of like there are things you can put in the pop-ups and the way you describe maybe the layers, and then there's also visual kind of approaches too to sort of represent that this is a range or that there is some kind of uncertainty to this. It's really interesting that there's not necessarily one way to do this. So kind of along those lines, what advice do you have for people who want to map demographics or complex data sets?
Yes. So my advice here is really think about your denominator. So we map a lot of like educational attainment rates, how many people hold a bachelor's degree or how many people graduated high school, that kind of thing. And you'll notice that some of our maps will say this is out of all adults age 25 and over. Because if we're including kids in there, it's going to disadvantage a state like Utah or Idaho that has a lot more kids versus West Virginia, which is like the population is just so much older. So how can you compare those two percentages? Basically, the only people that should be in your denominator are the ones who even have a chance to be in the numerator in the first place. So yeah, the education one really is a prime example of that. Another one is poverty rates. So the denominator there, it sounds very strange, but this is the amount of people in poverty out of everyone for whom poverty is determined, because census does not compute poverty for college students, for people in assisted living homes, for foster children, all these different groups. So when you think about poverty as a numerator, think about who the denominator is in the first place too, because if you've got a big assisted living facility in your census tract, you don't want that to throw off and make your poverty rate not comparable or not, you want it to be apples to apples. So you'll see some strange denominators maybe, but they are refined denominators. So that would be one little nugget that I would share with anyone is really think about how you can define your percentages in a way that's going to be comparable and fair.
Awesome. I think that's a really great recommendation, and it's probably something that people don't think enough about. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for this discussion, Diana. This was really interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, this was great.